looking at aspects of love this month, and specifically we're looking at 4 types of love referenced in the Bible. And English it's a rather limiting language, right? I mean, we only have one word, love, for these many different aspects, and we use that one word to mean a lot of different things. Some other languages, and specifically ancient Greek, have many words to describe the different aspects of love that we group into that one word. So you might remember last week that we mentioned some of those, and they are, Mary, I think there's a slide for that. Storge, which is a familial type of love, the kind of love you'd have for a mother and father might have for a child, for aunts and uncles, that sort of thing. Phileo, which is what we kind of zoomed in on last week, which is brotherly love, literally brotherly love. And that's the kind of love that we all hopefully have for each other here in this room. Eros, which is a more sensual, passionate, physical kind of love to be experienced between a husband and a wife. And there's an aspect of desire and physical attraction with that type of love that God's blessed us with to draw us into those deeper relationships with who He intends to be our life partners. And we're going to look a little more at that this morning. And then, of course, overriding all of those is agape, and that's the type of love that God shows for us, that strong, selfless, sacrificial love that we often refer to as unconditional love. And last week we talked about an overarching verse for the month, and I don't think I have it on the screen this morning, but it's 1 John 4, 7, and 8. It's in the memory verse in your bulletin. Dear friends, or as I like to say, beloved, let us love one another, for love comes from God, and everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. So love comes from God. If we're born of God, saved, adopted into His family, eternal new creations, whatever we want to call it, we love. If someone doesn't love, they don't know God. And I know it's a bit cliche, but we looked at that saying. You probably make a good meme. No God, no love. No God, no love. God designed us to love and to be loved. And it's one of the ways that we're created in His image, right? We're called into a relationship with God, and through that relationship, we experience His deep, unconditional, sustaining love for us. And in His wisdom, He designed us not only to receive His love, but also to share His love with those He's brought into our lives. And last week, like we talked about, we had a deeper look at phileo, or brotherly love. The word Paul used in the passage that we looked at last week is Philadelphius, which is where we get the word phileo, and it literally comes from 2 root words, philos meaning loving friend, and adelphos meaning a brother. So literally it means brotherly love. You know, we talked about the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the city of brotherly love, ironically named. We took a look at 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 9 through 12, and we saw in that passage a few things about love that we're encouraged to have for our fellow Christians. One of those was that phileo is God-taught. It has a divine origin. We talked about how when God moves into the neighborhood, He starts to fix things up. He changes things. He makes them right. Phileo love for our brothers and sisters, is one of the ways He does that. We talked about how phileo love, brotherly love, is a call to action. We looked at Romans 12:10, which encouraged us to be devoted to one another, be loyal and consistent, and to honor others above ourselves. We looked at Hebrews 13:1, which encourages us to keep on loving one another. You might remember that was the theme of last week, keep on. Be faithful in living life with fellow Christ followers, fellow family members. And we talked about being selfless and Christ-centered instead of selfish and self-centered, and the practical aspects of encouragement, accountability, and forgiveness. And those are kind of the 3 legs to that brotherly love stool. We saw how we can grow in our ability to love one another, and we're encouraged to do so more and more, as Paul wrote in this passage. There's that consistency thing again. And then finally, Paul gave us a few practical ways that we can show our brotherly love for each other in verses 11 and 12 of 1 Thessalonians 4. Lead a quiet life, mind your own business, and work with your hands. And in doing those things, we return the love that we receive. We earn the respect of folks that aren't yet following Christ, and we play out our own role in God's provision so that we're not a burden on others around us. And that brings us to today's topic, eros, love. And I got to tell you right up front, I'll confess that this is probably one of the more difficult sermons I've had to write, because this deals with some sensitive things, right? It deals with that physical love between a husband and wife. And where eros is concerned, there are a wide variety of opinions in the Christian world about eros. So you'll hear mine today, and I encourage you, talk to the Holy Spirit about it. If I say something that doesn't resonate with you, come and talk with me, and we'll have a good conversation. But eros love is a passionate love. And as such, it's an aspect of love that can be easily misused. And it's often misused in our culture today. Eros is the root word of our modern word erotic, which is defined as being of, related to, or tending to arouse sexual desire. Eros love is that kind of love that can be confused with or easily become lust. Now, eros love within the boundaries of a healthy, God-honoring marriage can be a beautiful thing. But it can also be used in a way that can destroy that healthy marriage. The same love that causes the physical attraction in our being for our spouse, our life partner, the one with whom we make the eternal covenant of a marriage vow, is the same love that marketing experts use to sell us endless beauty products, fashion clothing, cars, Carl Jr.'s hamburgers, GoDaddy web hosting, you name it. If you don't believe me, later this afternoon there's going to be a marketing extravaganza on TV. Just watch one commercial break and I guarantee you're going to see some misused eros love trying to sell you Doritos. Guard your hearts, people. So as I was doing my due diligence and looking up information about eros love and looking at some commentaries that other people have made down through the course of time, I found one commentary by a Baptist pastor that made the following statement about eros love. And I read Marla this entire passage last night as we were sitting there. But he says, eros is the carnal instinct of desire. This is based upon coveting, selfishness, and lust, and has no place in the life of a believer. Personally, and I don't really like to get personal in a sermon, but personally, I get where this guy's coming from, but I think I'd stop a little short of saying it has no place in the life of a believer. He does raise a good point in looking at how dangerous misused passion can be, however. But I believe we're given some biblical examples of a healthy marriage relationship, and those include some pretty passionate concepts. Going all the way back to the beginning, right? Let's start at the beginning, and we'll go back to Genesis 2. God had created Adam, and he knew that boy needed some help. Genesis 2:18 says, God knew it is not good for man to be alone. Knew if he was alone, he's probably going to be eating poorly and not maintaining things right. In verse 20, it says that no suitable helper was found for man. So God, being God, knowing what is good and right, made Adam a helper. He didn't make him another buddy to hang out with. He put him to sleep, took out one of his ribs, and from that rib he made Adam a life partner. Matthew Henry, another Bible commentator, made the observation. It's used at a lot of weddings, and I really love this illustration, so I'm going to throw it in here this morning with no extra charge. It says, the woman was made of a rib out of the side of Adam, not made out of his head to rule over him, nor out of his feet to be trampled upon by him, but of his side, to be equal with him, under his arm, to be protected, and near his heart, to be beloved. And the attraction is what attracts us to somebody that we want to walk alongside in life and protect and love. And like I said, I just find that interesting, so I'm going to throw that in for no extra charge today. But Genesis 2:22 says, after God made woman, he brought her to the man. And can you imagine that? Here's Adam waking up from divine surgery, creation's first ribectomy. And here's this beautiful new being, this new creation made by God to be joined with him, literally part of him. Genesis tells us what Adam said, but I'm sure that if he had my language today, his first words would have probably been hubba hubba. But Genesis 2:23 and 24 says, now this is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And then we're told in verse 24, this is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Chapter 2 then closes with the words, Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Doesn't say they felt no attraction. I'm sure there was attraction there. I'm sure there was some passion there. But there was no shame associated with it, because sin had not yet entered the world. This is the first marriage in the Bible. Adam was a man, Eve was a woman, and I'm pretty certain they were both excited to be there with each other. I'll advance that this is the first reference to that passionate eros love that we see in the Bible. And we're told that the reason for this is so that man and woman who are united in marriage will become one flesh. There's a concept that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think that's Aristotle, if my Greek philosophers are accurate. And I contend that this is the same as with marriage, right? There's a man and there's a woman, and they're attracted to one another. There's that eros love. And that eros love grows into a stronger love for one another, and they join in marriage by the grace of God. They become more together than they were alone. This is a gift from God. It's good that we should marry, and it's good that we should be attracted to our wives or our husbands. That being said, there's some serious instruction given about the seriousness of that covenant relationship of marriage. Now, you probably already know what a covenant is, but a covenant is defined as a formal, solemn, and binding agreement. It's a promise. It's more than just saying, hey, let's hang out for a while. Let's hook up and hang out, as Toby Keith would say. It's about a commitment. Most marriage vows contain the language, forsaking all others, richer or poorer, sickness or health, from this day forward until death do us part. And I think that's an interesting point to be made there about death do us part. If we're following Christ, our life is what? Eternal. So there isn't death. That's an eternal commitment to someone of the opposite sex. Marriage is a serious thing. Sounds like no longer two but one flesh to me. When that marriage is entered into, you cease to be the single person you were previously, and you become part of something greater, something new. You become one flesh, a new creation. We see this concept at the beginning of Genesis. It's echoed by Christ in Matthew 19, verse 6, and later on even by Paul in his letter to Ephesus, Ephesians 5:31, the same language. A man shall leave his mother and father, cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Marriage, a healthy marriage, may start off with that eros love, that attraction and passion, but that's not enough to sustain a marriage as the covenant relationship it's intended to be. There's a commitment involved that goes deeper than just attraction that you have for one another. Jumping a little forward and talking a little more about that commitment, Hebrews 13:4, Paul's writing to, well, we assume it's Paul writing in the book of Hebrews. I assume it's Paul in the book of Hebrews, writing to the church and saying that marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. And this verse speaks to the danger of this eros love that we're looking at this morning. As much as it's good and proper for a husband to be passionately attracted to his wife and a wife to her husband, it's equally wrong and downright destructive for someone to embrace that passion and desire for someone outside the marriage relationship. History shows us that immorality was pretty commonplace in the world in 63 AD, which is when the book of Ephesians was written, the book of Hebrews was written, if you're keeping score. It wasn't chaste and pure like the world is today. You know, they probably had people marching down the street in the middle of June proclaiming what goes on in their private bedrooms. Oh, wait, that does happen today. These words are still true for us today. They needed good instruction to remind them to honor their marriages. We need good instruction to remind us to honor marriage. The use of the phrase marriage bed here refers directly to the act of sex within a marriage. And this is an awkward thing to get up in front of a room of people and talk about. But the instruction here is clear that what happens in the marriage bed between a husband and wife should stay in the bedroom. The covenant relationship of a husband and wife should be honored by all. And when it says all there, it's not just talking about the husband and wife, that's talking about other people. That's talking about when you see somebody that's beautiful but you know they're married, honor that marriage. Don't go trying to break things up. And I know I hope I'm preaching to the choir here, and that nobody in this room would do anything like that, but it happens in our world. Marriage should be honored by all. And the physical, passionate relations that happen between a husband and wife should remain between a husband and wife, be kept pure. There's a word, unadulterated, and that word means not mingled or diluted with extraneous matter. Don't be adding extra stuff in there that wasn't in God's design. Pure. That's some pretty clear instructions, folks. We're called to be passionately connected to our spouse and our spouse alone. To share that passion with others outside the marriage dilutes the purity of the marriage. Think about a recipe or something. My wife's a really good cook. And there are times when she didn't follow the plan because we didn't have this, so she put that in there. We didn't have the other thing, so she put that in there. We didn't have quite that much, so I'm going to go ahead and make it anyway and just not quite put enough of stuff in there. And when you follow the plan and add all the ingredients, in the right amounts, in the right order, it can become something beautiful. One of my favorite recipes, a recipe that I can typically make off the top of my head without using a recipe, is for a bread. 4 ingredients: flour, water, sugar, and yeast. And you combine these things in the right order. You got to combine the sugar and the water, then add the yeast, then you take the flour and you add that mixture to that. You got to do it in the right order, and it becomes this bread that is just, it doesn't last around our house. But I'd be hard-pressed to eat a mouthful of flour or to eat a mouthful of sugar. Certainly ain't going to take a snort a line of yeast. But when those things are combined, and they're combined in the right way, the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts. And a marriage is like that too. If you start diluting things, you start adding things that aren't part of the plan, it changes the flavor, the texture. Man, you can destroy something really good by not sticking to the plan. And a marriage is that same way. As followers of Christ, as children of God, we see another consequence of misuse of this eros love that God gives us as a blessing to the marriage relationship, and that's seen here in this same verse in Hebrews 13:4. That verse closes with the words, God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. I don't want to be judged by God in that way. So let me try and sum up what we've shared this morning. Eros love is a passionate love that causes a physical, even sexual attraction between a man and a woman, and this type of love can be used as a true blessing within the confines of a healthy, God-honoring marriage. This can inspire thoughts like those Solomon shared in his song, and if you haven't ever read the Song of Solomon, you might not want to do it in mixed company because you'll probably get embarrassed. It brings excitement and healthy passion to the covenant relationship between a man and a woman. This is a good, healthy application of eros love. Still, eros alone is not a firm enough foundation on which to build a marriage, and a husband and wife should be serious in committing to one another in a way that sacrifices self to no longer be two separate beings, but become one new flesh. At the same time, while we're blessed to enjoy this passionate attraction with our spouse, we should guard our spirits and guard our hearts so that our marriage remains pure and we remain committed exclusively to our partner, our husband or wife. By doing this, we enjoy all the blessings of passion, love, and marriage that God's created for us while honoring Him as we do so.